Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week.
England flags hanging from pub windows, smoke drifting across city streets, middle-aged men in Stone Island jackets marching behind banners, riot vans parked outside train stations, chants echoing through town centres that once lived and breathed heavy industry, shipbuilding, steelworks and football. For a lot of people watching from the outside, it looks intimidating. To others, it looks patriotic. And right now, across Britain, more and more, football hooligans, football casuals, and old school firms are becoming heavily involved in anti-immigration protests, nationalist demonstrations, and political street movements. But why? Why are football hooligans joining anti-immigration protests? Is it racism? Is it patriotism? Or is it something much deeper rooted inside working class British culture that most people outside these circles simply do not understand? Because to understand this movement, you first have to understand the mentality of football casuals themselves: tribal, territorial, loyal, aggressive when threatened, deeply protective of their own people, their own pubs, their own estates, their own football clubs, and their own identity. For decades, football firms operated almost like unofficial armies, connected to towns and cities across England, Scotland, and Wales. Men willing to travel hundreds of miles to defend reputation, honour, and territory. And although the violence made headlines, underneath it all was something far more powerful: belonging, brotherhood, identity. And that identity matters now more than ever. Because many of these men genuinely believe the country they grew up in is disappearing. Walk through certain parts of Britain today and you will hear football supporters say they no longer recognise the areas they grew up in. High streets changed, communities changed, traditions fading, pubs closing down, factories gone, local jobs disappearing. And while politicians on television speak about economic growth, diversity and globalisation, many working class football supporters feel ignored, mocked and pushed aside. Now, whether you agree with that or not, that feeling is very real. And here is the uncomfortable truth many people are afraid to say out loud. Large sections of the British working class feel abandoned by the political establishment. They feel like their concerns about immigration, housing, crime, wages and national identity are dismissed instantly as racism before any real conversation even begins. So, where do they go? They go to people who speak their language: football firms, protest groups, street movements, social media pages, Telegram chats, pub conversations, men they trust. And football culture has always been built on trust. You stand together. You back your mates. You defend your own. That mentality did not disappear when the fighting declined. It simply evolved into something else. Now, before this video goes any further, this is important. Not every football hooligan is anti-immigration. Not every football casual is political. And not every person attending these protests is racist. That is exactly why this conversation is so controversial, because the media often portrays every nationalist protest as one thing, while many of the people attending see themselves very differently. They see themselves as patriotic. They see themselves as defending British culture, English identity, and the future of their communities. But what do you think? Do you believe football lads are becoming more political? Do you think patriotism and racism are being confused in modern Britain? And why do you think so many former football lads are now turning up at protests instead of away days. Let me know in the comments, because this subject divides opinion like almost no other in the UK right now. To understand how we got here, you have to go back decades, back to the terraces, back to the 70s and 80s, back when football violence, skinhead culture, nationalism and working class identity all collided on Britain's streets. Back then, football was not the polished global product it is today. It was rough, raw, working class. Stadiums were crumbling. Terraces packed shoulder to shoulder with men who worked hard all week in factories, docks, mines, construction sites and industrial estates. Saturdays were an escape, a release valve, and inside those grounds, tribal identity meant everything. You were not just supporting a football club, you were defending your city, your area, your people, your reputation. Young men growing up in places like East London, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Newcastle, and Glasgow were raised in environments where toughness mattered, respect mattered. Looking weak could make life difficult, and football firms gave young men something powerful: status, brotherhood, adrenaline, purpose. The media called them hooligans, animals, thugs. But inside the firms themselves, many saw it differently. They saw organisation, loyalty, honour among mates. And above all else, identity. That's one of the biggest things outsiders still fail to understand about football casual culture today. Identity is everything. The clothes, the music, the pubs, the away days, the stories, the loyalty to your own. It becomes part of who you are as a man. And when people feel their identity is under threat, they react emotionally. Now, fast forward to modern Britain. Over the last 20 years, immigration has become one of the biggest political talking points in the country. Open borders, illegal immigration, asylum hotels, small boats crossing the channel, rising pressure on housing, GP services and local communities. These topics dominate social media, newspaper headlines, pub conversations and political debates every single week. And while some people celebrate multiculturalism and immigration as positive for Britain, others believe the country has changed too fast. Football supporters are not isolated from those conversations. In many ways, they are at the centre of them, because football culture has always reflected wider working class frustration. When factories closed, football crowds reflected it. When unemployment rose, football crowds reflected it. When nationalism increased, football crowds reflected it. And now, as immigration becomes one of the most divisive topics in Britain, football firms and casual culture are once again reflecting wider tensions inside parts of the working class. Many football lads genuinely believe British citizens are being ignored by politicians. They talk about veterans struggling while asylum hotels receive funding. They talk about young British families unable to get housing. They talk about communities changing too quickly. They talk about crime stories that go viral online involving migrants or asylum seekers. And whether those stories represent the majority or not almost becomes irrelevant emotionally, because perception is powerful. That is something modern politics often misunderstands. People react emotionally long before they react statistically. And football culture has always been emotional. It is tribal instinct, territory, fear of losing control, fear of decline, fear that your community no longer belongs to you. Again, whether people watching agree or disagree with that feeling is another debate entirely. But these emotions are real to the men involved. And when large groups of men with strong tribal identities all share the same frustrations, movements begin to form. That is why you now see football lads appearing at anti-immigration protests across Britain. Sometimes former hooligans, sometimes active casuals, sometimes just ordinary football supporters frustrated with politics. England flags appear beside football club flags. Chants once heard on terraces now echo through town centres during demonstrations. Old rivalries are temporarily forgotten because a bigger shared identity takes over. National identity. And that is fascinating when you think about it. For decades, these firms hated each other. Bitter enemies, violence, territorial warfare between clubs. Yet now, you sometimes see lads from rival clubs standing side by side at protests because they believe they are fighting for something bigger than football. What does that tell you about how strongly they feel? Do you think football culture naturally pushes men toward nationalism because of its tribal nature? Or do you think politicians and the media have failed to listen to working class concerns for too long? Comment below, because this conversation is happening all across Britain right now. Another important thing to understand is this. Most football hooligans do not see themselves as extremists. In fact, many completely reject that label. Speak to old school casuals or former hooligans, and many will tell you they have mates from different races, backgrounds and religions. Some firms themselves became multicultural over time. One of the most famous examples being the Zulu Warriors, connected to Birmingham City FC, a firm often referenced as one of the most ethnically mixed football firms in Britain. That complexity matters, because modern media discussions often reduce everything down to simple labels. Far right, racist, fascist. But reality inside football culture is often more complicated than that. Some lads attending protests are absolutely driven by anger over immigration policy. Others are motivated by patriotism. Others by frustration with the economy. Others simply distrust the political system entirely. And some are there because protest culture itself gives them the same adrenaline, unity, and identity they once found on match days. That part is hugely important. For many older casuals, the streets were once where they felt most alive. The excitement, the camaraderie, the feeling of purpose, the organised meetups, the chants, the police presence, the risk, the brotherhood. When football policing became stronger and firms faded from their peak years, some of that energy had nowhere to go. Politics and protest filled the vacuum, and social media accelerated everything. Years ago, football lads mostly spoke inside pubs, bookmakers, football grounds and social clubs. Now opinions spread instantly online. One video from an asylum hotel incident, one clip of violence, one controversial interview, one stabbing, one political speech. Within hours, thousands of people are discussing it inside football pages, casual culture groups and protest channels online. Algorithms reward outrage. The angrier people become, the more content they consume. And this is where things become dangerous sometimes, because fear spreads rapidly online. People begin seeing every story as evidence that the country is collapsing. Every incident becomes proof of a wider narrative. Every political failure reinforces distrust. Again, some concerns raised are legitimate discussions about borders, crime, integration and public services. Those are real political debates happening across Europe right now. But online environments can also push people deeper into anger and paranoia because negative stories spread faster than positive ones. Football culture and social media are an explosive combination because both operate emotionally. Loyalty, identity, anger, humiliation, pride, belonging. That emotional energy is powerful. And perhaps one of the biggest reasons these protest movements resonate with football lads is because many feel modern Britain no longer respects traditional masculinity. Listen to the language often used by old school football supporters: toughness, pride, backbone, standing your ground, defending your family, defending your community. These ideas are central to hooligan culture. Many lads feel modern society mocks those values. So when protest movements emerge talking about protecting Britain, defending borders, or standing up for local communities, it naturally appeals to men raised inside tribal football environments. It gives them a mission again, a sense of purpose, a feeling that they are standing for something larger than themselves. Now, whether that is productive or destructive depends entirely on perspective. Critics argue these movements create division, fear, and hostility. Supporters argue they are speaking up about problems others are too afraid to address. That is the divide Britain finds itself trapped in today, and football culture sits right in the middle of it. Because football has always been about more than sport in Britain. It is class identity, regional identity, political identity, masculinity, territory, history, family tradition, pride. For some people, supporting a club becomes one of the strongest emotional bonds in their entire life. That is why chants about England and patriotism resonate so strongly inside football crowds. You hear it during international tournaments especially. The flags come out, the beers flow, the streets fill with national pride, men hug strangers, cities erupt emotionally. For a few weeks, many supporters feel united under one identity: English. And for some football lads, they feel that identity is constantly criticised or treated with suspicion in modern Britain. That resentment builds over time, especially online where people constantly argue over immigration, race, nationalism, and British culture. Do you think English identity is unfairly criticised in modern Britain? Or do you think some protest movements deliberately use patriotism to hide more extreme beliefs underneath? Let me know below, because there are strong opinions on both sides of this debate. One thing that cannot be denied is that mistrust in institutions has exploded. Politicians, mainstream media, police, the courts. Large sections of football culture distrust all of them. That distrust goes back decades. Heavy-handed policing during the hooligan era, media demonization, surveillance, football banning orders, constant portrayal as criminals. Many lads developed a mentality that authority figures were against them long before immigration became a political issue. That mentality still exists today. So when governments tell people there is no problem, some football supporters instinctively distrust the message immediately. They believe the truth is being hidden. Whether justified or not, that suspicion fuels protest culture massively. And once people feel ignored, they start listening to alternative voices instead. That is why independent commentators, protest figures, and anti-establishment personalities have become hugely influential inside casual culture circles, especially when economic pressure increases. Look at Britain today. Cost of living crisis, housing pressure, NHS waiting lists, communities struggling financially, wages stretched, high streets declining, crime fears increasing, social trust declining. In times of uncertainty, people naturally search for explanations and someone to blame. Historically, that has happened in every society. And football culture, because of its tribal instincts, often responds emotionally and collectively to those frustrations. You also have to remember that many old-school football supporters grew up during a very different Britain. More culturally uniform, stronger local identities, stronger community ties, more stable industries, local pubs full every weekend, kids playing outside together, neighbours knowing each other for decades. Whether that memory is fully accurate or partly nostalgia does not really matter emotionally. People compare the present to the past they remember. At the time of me making this video, the nation mourned the death of young Henry Novak. R.I.P. lad. This one and the circumstances has hit everyone hard. Again, this is absolutely not about race. It is about recognizing right from wrong, and this is wrong, and makes me, and I'm guessing you viewers, feel sick to your stomach. I have just watched Henry's dad ask for calm and understanding. To be honest, he is a better human being than me, because if that was my son, taken like that, I'm going all out, and nothing is stopping me, so fair play. I have a lot of respect for the way he has conducted himself. Right. Thank you as always for taking the time out to watch my video. I have plenty more videos that may interest you on my YouTube channel. Have a look around and see if anything takes your fancy. If you are into football casual videos, then click like and subscribe. That way you will be notified when we put out a new video. Plus, it helps our channel grow, so a huge thank you. See you next time. God bless.